I stood at the entrance observing the vibrant red-haired woman, Nicole, who was vocally expressing her anger. The rain caused her hair to cling to her face in lengthy strands. Despite the chilly, pelting rain, she didn't stop her vehement rant. To be frank, the loud rain and the low buzzing in my ears made it hard to catch every word she said. Yet, I grasped the gist of it. My wife Beth was involved in a romantic relationship with Nicole's husband, Justin. Nicole, known as Nikki, was adamant that I intervene. A few months earlier, during a scarce business trip, Beth called. I was looking out at the rain hitting the grimy window of my hotel room when she announced she wanted a divorce after 9 years of marriage. Our physical separation was brief, merely a couple of weeks, and we had only cohabited for 5 months since my return from military service. I was oblivious to any issues. Beth had never mentioned them. From what I could piece together, she had been emotionally entangled with Justin for 3 months and likely escalated their affair while I was away. I started connecting the dots about a week before Nikki confronted me, yet I lacked concrete evidence and struggled to devise a plan. Beth had consented to couples therapy well before I discovered the affair. However, she ceased attending after just 2 sessions. I suspected she hoped the therapist would ease me into accepting the breakup. Probably, she suggested therapy to appear as though she was making an effort, particularly in the eyes of her family, whose opinion she valued above all. So she continued the affair, relying on my income until it seemed acceptable to leave for Justin, who was then prepared to abandon his wife and child. Beth and I were parents to twin daughters, Angie and Amy, aged 2. Beth would leave me to look after them the moment I got home, using her gym visits or runs as an excuse, though she often met with Justin afterwards. Describing my emotions as merely unhappy doesn't suffice. Whenever I attempted to address our issues or communicate, Beth would erupt in anger, denying any wrongdoing and holding me accountable for everything. She frequently complained about the difficulty of caring for our children alone during my work hours, accusing me of using them against her claims that were baseless and illogical. Despite my full-time job, I spent more time with our children than she did. Navigating the divorce legally was disheartening. In our jurisdiction, infidelity was largely disregarded and didn't impact the proceedings significantly. Beth was well aware that the legal system typically favors the mother in custody and child support cases, regardless of her actions. Alimony for an extended period was common when young children were involved, allowing the former spouse to avoid employment to properly parent. Therefore, I was confronted by a loud, displeased woman with fiery red hair, an imposing height, and an awkward demeanor, her nose sharp and her lips thin with dissatisfaction, carrying extra weight from a recent childbirth, an addition that her slender frame did not accommodate well. Her skin turned blotchy from the mixture of anger and cold. Unable to get a word in, I retreated, opening the door wider for her. Acknowledging the futility of our neighbors witnessing this altercation, I led her inside. As she continued to loudly criticize me, I walked to the dining table, pulled out a chair for her, and took a seat myself. In time, her fury gave way to bitter tears, then to quivering cries, and eventually she collapsed into a heap of sobs, her head in her hands on the table, her wet, dark copper hair forming a damp cluster. I lingered a bit longer until her runny nose ceased. "Are you done quietly?" She glanced up, her eyes inflamed with fury towards me, snorted softly twice but remained silent, and I proceeded. "If there was anything I could do, believe me, I would. I dislike this situation just as much as you." I went on to clarify how the laws functioned and how at a disadvantage I found myself. "You must confront her, notwithstanding the anger, and I don't fault you for it. It's a solid strategy then." I contemplated the real possibility of landing in jail and subsequently becoming homeless. We remained mute for a while until I stood up and made some warm tea. The rain felt chilly. I made a considerable effort not to gaze at her. Although she might not have been conventionally attractive, she lacked the figure that I usually found appealing, and to me, that mattered significantly. She trembled as the warmth of the tea flowed through her. Damn, I hadn't realized how freezing I was without speaking. She caught a glimpse of her chest. "Crap, not again," she muttered, seemingly embarrassed. She hugged herself tightly. Internally, I sighed. It was the most enticing moment I had experienced in months. "I could fetch you a sweater if you'd like. Do you have a preference for one?" I retrieved a hooded sweater of mine, which she quickly donned and secured. She squirmed, slipped her arms out from the sleeves, twirled around, discarded her damp top and undergarment beneath, and then slid her arms back into the sleeves. I collected the wet clothes and tossed them into the dryer, noting to myself that the entertainment hadn't ceased. The sweater alone seemed more revealing than the bra and shirt together. I passed her a towel. "Dry off your hair. Please, thank you," she responded, drying her hair, and as she did, I couldn't help but notice the motion. It felt odd to be drawn to her in that moment. I allowed myself to watch until her hair was dry and she ceased moving. "I despise them," she stated harshly. "I concur. This scenario was unforeseen." I noticed a glimpse of shared anguish as profound as my own. "I can't match her beauty. She's physically fit and stunning. I've gained weight since." Giving birth, she wasn't significantly overweight, perhaps around 10 pounds or so. She simply wasn't in prime condition. Yet, in some respects, she was correct. Beth was indeed a picturesque figure, blonde, with blue eyes, slender and elegant. Nevertheless, Nikki needed reassurance. "She looks great because she has time for the gym and to run. And you're not overweight in the slightest." A slight shimmer of something other than despair briefly emerged. "So what now?" I shrugged. "I'm clueless. Each time I engage in this scenario, I end up alone and financially drained. With her controlling the children's access, I shared all the information I had managed to gather." "What if you had proof of unfaithfulness? It's irrelevant in court." "They don't care. Yet the same issues that disadvantage me could benefit you in your divorce." It seemed improbable. "Justin works for his cousin in a construction firm, with most of his earnings unreported. Hence, there's not much official income for child support or alimony for me and our child," she explained. "I just want to defeat them." I pondered briefly. "How can we undermine them?" She shrugged. I started feeling slightly more optimistic, finally having a partner in this dreadful predicament. "Seriously, everyone errs. We just need to uncover theirs. An unofficial income from his cousin could be an excellent starting point." I thought about the new shoes in Beth's closet that seemed extravagantly pricey. That money had to originate from somewhere. Something's off. "Beth is spending unusually. Something is going on there," she agreed, with a hint of genuine vigor. "We can manage this," I smiled. "It won't be difficult. We'll gather the kids and investigate stealthily, resembling an awkward blend of Magnum Pie and the Brady Bunch." "No, my sister Angie can look after the kids. She's already caring for Jamie," she interjected, her expression turning reflective. "So, where are your kids now?" "They're asleep upstairs," I replied. She surveyed the room, her eyes eventually resting on the closed front door. "Do you have any sweatpants? I'm soaking." I fetched my sweatpants as she removed her shoes. I pointed towards the bathroom, but she turned away from me, unzipped her drenched jeans, slid out of them along with her underwear, and stepped aside. She then began to gently dry her legs and backside with the towel. The hint was quite clear, and I could practically feel her tension. It seemed she was taking a gamble, feeling already spurned. If a man holding a grudge, who had every justification to want payback, and who, incidentally, had been deprived of intimacy for an extended period, had spurned her, she would have felt devastated. I was overwhelmed by frustration, but my irritation was directed at my wife for putting me in such a position. Nikki went on to say, "I can't fathom how Justin could do this to me." I moved closer and placed my hand on her bare leg. She shivered, and her voice faltered, but she did not pull away. Therefore, I placed my other hand on her leg. "I don't like you, but I despise him." She pushed me back. I caressed my leg with one hand and opened my sweater with the other, dropping it to the ground by our feet. Nikki was grateful for the warmth of my hands. Her skin was still cold from the chill, and it seemed she was soaking up the warmth from my hands, and when I softly kissed her neck, grazing her skin with my teeth, her legs nearly buckled. She let out a soft moan. A bit later, I lifted her and set her on the dining table. I was not going to let another moment of this opportunity pass, uncertain of when I might experience intimacy again. I wished to savor it. After everything had settled down, she gave me a wicked smile. After cleaning up, I tossed her jeans, underwear, shirt and bra into the dryer, and we sat naked at the table for a few moments, sipping on tea that had gone cold. She looked at me sadly under her messy red curls. "You knew this would happen as soon as you invited me over," she said. "Actually, not until you took off your jeans," she chuckled, sounding quite youthful, which was a bit disconcerting. "I was worried you'd say no," I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in a long while. How could any man refuse that since the birth of the baby? Justin hasn't shown any interest in me or the baby," she continued. I nodded. I had heard of such situations. Before I could respond, she added, "So how could Beth or any woman resist the kind of intimacy you've just shown me?" "You're far better than Justin." "I have no idea," I replied. "She just lost interest." Justin is younger, and she feels aged because of the children. This hasn't happened since the twins were born. I guess she felt she needed to act more motherly towards me, or something. I can't believe you can't manage your wife. I still don't like you. Jerk. There was annoyance in our exchange, but we both understood it wasn't genuinely aimed at each other. If you really want to sort this out, see if your sister can look after my kids with yours tomorrow night. We should wrap this up. They'll be back in about an hour, and I need to tidy up this room a bit. You should spray some air freshener around. It smells strongly of intimacy in here. She hurried into her clothes and dashed out. I cleaned the room thoroughly and put the towels in the washing machine along with the clothes. When Beth came home, I found it unexpectedly simple to dodge our usual late-night arguments, the ones we had when she denied something and lied. She appeared somewhat baffled by my calm demeanor. It's remarkable how satisfying intimacy can soften hard feelings. She also noticed the immaculately clean kitchen. I think she mentioned something about the air freshener being effective, but frankly I was indifferent. She was just as taken aback when I omitted our nearly customary unsuccessful attempt to kiss her goodbye when I left for work the next morning. I didn't even try, and I could tell she was surprised as I simply headed for the door. In one way or another, I was determined to stop wallowing in misery and confront whatever came my way. At my job, I arranged to use a friend's automobile for several months. Nikki's sister, who bore a striking resemblance to her, stayed back to look after the kids at her residence. Nikki and I departed. Our goal was to inspect his cousin's construction company's trailer to see if anything illicit was present, because the investigation could start there. As she entered the vehicle, she grimaced a bit, stating, "Everything aches. This is the first time I've engaged in sexual activity in a long time, and you weren't exactly soft. Don't expect much today." I was surprised sensitivity didn't seem to be her priority. Despite trying to hide it, she couldn't help but crack a small smile. I observed that she had put on a bit of makeup for the first time since our meeting, although it was not applied expertly. I decided to alter our plans and headed to the shopping mall instead. We attempted to find topics of discussion, but since we didn't have much in common, our conversation was intermittent and awkward until we arrived at the mall's parking area. She was confused. "Are they here?" "No, but I believe we need to upset them. So there are a few tasks we need to complete," I replied. I led her to the makeup counter at Macy's. She gave me a serious and somewhat threatening look. "Consider it a disguise," I suggested. Over the next hour, 2 saleswomen experimented with numerous makeup combinations on her, eventually transforming Nikki into a surprisingly sophisticated appearance. They taught her how to use their products. She didn't emerge exactly beautiful, but she presented a sort of intense allure. The entire makeup set cost me $100, which was supposed to be for groceries, but I decided I could skip lunch at work for the next month to compensate. She held onto the small makeup bag as if it were precious. She didn't want to admit it, but she enjoyed it. "So, what's the plan?" she asked. "If we're to upset them, you need to be something Justin desires but has lost, and I need something that will make Beth feel outraged and envious. That will be your role. Conceal your makeup at home and only apply it when we go out together," I explained. She seemed confused, but after I detailed my plan, she remained silent for a moment, then admitted, "It sounds complex and time-consuming." I shrugged. "Do you have an alternative?" She smiled faintly. "No," and requested to go to my place to remove her makeup so Justin wouldn't see. She emerged from the bathroom minutes later, wearing nothing but a sly smile, and the makeup she had to cleanse away. The mischievous spark in her gaze was all the indication I needed of her intentions. Despite earlier warnings, it seemed a waste not to utilize the makeup. Afterward, we visited her sister's home, where Nikki enlisted her as a co-conspirator. It was clear she never had affection for Justin, and her assistance was crucial. Over the ensuing months, we focused on self-improvement. I exercised at my workplace during lunch breaks, while she trained at home. Together, we exercised in the basement, where Nikki shed her postnatal weight and I significantly increased my strength. We concealed our progress from our self-absorbed partners by wearing loose clothing and being deliberately vague. They hardly noticed us anyway. Additionally, our intimacy exceeded 5 or 6 times weekly, surpassing my experiences with Beth. Both of us, typically homebound and family-oriented, opted for a change. Remarkably, my basement transformed into a makeshift dance studio. With no prior knowledge, we relied on YouTube tutorials, dedicating our free nights and weekends, which our spouses neglected, to learning. We started with basic dance moves, gradually advancing to more complex ones, and particularly enjoyed salsa, saving it for the climax of our routine. I quickly realized the precarious nature of my situation with Nikki. Her emotional stability was questionable, resembling the unpredictability of an untamed Doberman. Her mood could shift suddenly, provoked by nearly anything, leading to bursts of irrational anger. The incidents involving Beth and Justin had fractured something vital, a boundary of sanity we had carelessly crossed. I always made an effort to watch her constantly. The only times she seemed at ease were during intimate moments or when she was with children, either mine or hers. Her affection for kids was immense. She would still refer to me as bastard. And I would call her names too, yet the words were, if not exactly tender and sweet, then strangely endearing. It was all to make ourselves feel better. There was genuine work that needed attention, and we had to approach it with great care. Nikki fabricated an excuse to stop by the construction company's trailer around 5:50 p.m. during the day and succeeded in recording the entire visit on her phone. It turned out the cousin was too frugal to invest in an alarm. We sneaked in there 5 times, took pictures of every document in each filing cabinet, and started examining the documents meticulously. We found more useful information in Justin's desk and Beth's handbag. After some time, neither of us quarreled with our partners, which became an issue for Beth. She seemed to really miss the disagreements and attempted to initiate conflicts without any reason, but I never gave in well, almost never. Truthfully, after spending the day with Nikki, I lacked the energy to engage in arguments. It took some time for me to realize that Beth probably used these disputes to excuse her unacceptable actions to herself. Each day she grew more bewildered. Justin, on the other hand, appeared to believe Nikki had totally lost interest. Additionally, I received a financial break when I got my $22,000 deposit back. I was planning to invest this money in a holiday home at a beach resort in Mexico to surprise Beth for our anniversary, an event that clearly wasn't going to happen. I didn't anticipate a refund, but they issued one anyway, possibly as a gesture of good customer service. This refund would be useful when Beth began making up reasons to stay over with Justin. Nikki and I started frequenting a dance club, slowly practicing the dance moves we had learned. It was enjoyable, but also brought stress. Nikki's unpredictability was a constant burden. She was easily irritated at best and could shift from extreme happiness to nearly uncontrollable anger without any warning if triggered. One particular evening nearly ended in chaos, highlighting the level of caution I needed to maintain. By this time, after weeks of working out and regular intimate encounters, Nikki exuded an intense allure, so it was unsurprising that we often attracted attention while dancing. She enjoyed the interest but, out of loyalty to her absent friends, tried not to flaunt her appeal with the men who approached, accompanied by their buddies. Unfortunately, some men expected her to dance with them as passionately as she did with me. Once, at a small club located in a remote area, I was dancing with a young, attractive blonde cheerleader, while a man attempted to place his hands under Nikki's skirt. She rebuffed him twice, but he persisted, and I intervened just as she was about to retaliate. "Stop," I told her, as her nails nearly grazed his eye, leaving red marks on his cheek. With the blonde on one side and Nikki, fuming yet intriguing, I braced for immediate trouble. The man quickly retreated, his eyes wide, while Nikki turned to face me, wrapping her leg around me and pressing close. "Bastard, you pulled my hair." "It hurts," she complained, then shifted her tone. "But you know just what I like, don't you?" She glanced at the blonde by my side, winked, and suggested, "You can do so much better than him. You deserve better." "He's nothing." We left the club quickly, which seemed wise given the approach of 3 men in security shirts. The parking lot was crowded with vehicles but empty of people. After passing 2 rows, I noticed a man with scratches and his 2 friends emerging. They moved towards Nikki and me. Nikki greeted them with a smile. "I don't see why I should be greeted with such behavior." "Your friend can just watch while you try to get what's in my pants," she taunted. Nikki paused, feigning fear as he reached out to grab her. However, I caught the manic sparkle in her eyes just as the largest of the 3 approached me from behind. Nikki didn't use her hands to fend him off. Instead, she bit him. His screams of terror and pain were piercing. Turning around, I faced them. I wasn't a professional fighter, but I knew enough about combat to recognize the wildness in Nikki's gaze. Thus, I was prepared. I yanked her back just as she was on the verge of striking him in the torso. "Nikki, stop!" She scanned me from head to toe with a wildly rebellious gaze, then halted and grinned as I moved away from her. I noticed a couple of silhouettes standing 15 feet away in the parking area, a petite blonde lady and a dark-haired goth lady, both looking stunned. Nikki also caught sight of the sorrowful blonde and approached her. I yearned to snatch her and flee, But I was aware that would incite fury, and if I didn't escort her away swiftly, we'd both end up incarcerated by dawn. She approached the evidently shocked blonde and loomed over her. "Nikki, behave." "She hasn't done anything to deserve this." Nikki glanced at me and smirked. "Oh, I'm aware." She drew the blonde closer and kissed her intensely. I was on the brink of stepping in when I realized that the blonde was eagerly reciprocating the kiss. Nikki gradually released her. The blonde gazed at her as though mesmerized. "Trust me, you can do far better than him." We entered the car, and an ambulance sped by approximately 2 miles away. I didn't need to speculate about its destination and could only hope our license plate hadn't been noted. I drove into the parking lot to offer Nikki my shirt, but she had other immediate interests, leading us to recline the seat and make love until she felt content. This endured a considerable while, after which she remarked, "I really messed up, didn't I? We're all flawed in certain aspects, though I genuinely benefited from it." "Causing him pain felt exhilarating, yes," I observed. "It's somewhat disconcerting in a manner reminiscent of Hannibal Lecter. Inflicting pain on him was akin to making love. I could freely express all my anger. He merited it, though I'm uncertain the law would concur. I believe his girlfriend was fine with it." Nikki chuckled. "Seriously, about causing harm, ensure I don't repeat this. Promise me," she said earnestly, tears welling in her eyes. "You were defending yourself, I understand, but that's beside the point. I had a strong desire to injure him. What if it happens again? What if I'm unable to restrain myself? What if I lose my way back?" She suddenly sounded like a young girl lost and afraid of the dark, which genuinely terrified me. Nikki likely required substantial assistance, possibly medication. Indeed, she might have needed regular checkups. The paperwork attributed the vicious assault in the parking lot to a gang of 6 men and a Latina, as witnessed by a blonde named Amber. It made me chuckle when I showed Nikki the documents. "So it seems you made an impression on Amber." After all, Nikki smiled. She seemed pleasant. Strawberry lip balm. "Do you like women?" I hadn't really thought it was like that. I was merely flirting with her at the club, but being in a parking lot is an entirely different scenario. She desired me. I could feel it, see it in her gaze. And since you and I have been together, I've essentially had no sexual boundaries. However, following this episode, Nikki appeared to be getting her act together, albeit slowly and erratically, but steadily improving. I witnessed her battle to suppress the demon within, occasionally succeeding. Nikki's sister couldn't always look after the kids, so Nikki frequently brought Jimmy over, and we practiced putting them to sleep. As we stood by the doorway observing them, I would sometimes steal glances at Nikki and find myself taken aback by the gentleness in her expression. Occasionally she caught my look and offered a sad, soft, half smile. At such moments her demons seemed a world away. I was certain that something would occur sooner or later. Eventually, Beth encountered me shirtless, remarked on my weight loss and new muscle gain. I chose not to argue, put on my shirt, and exited the room. Above all, I wished for her not to notice the marks Nikki's fingernails had left on my back and buttocks from the prior night. Beth's growing suspicion meant it was time for us to advance to the next phase. I mentioned this to Nikki, so a few days later, instead of working out and being intimate, we possessed a vehicle and a high-quality digital camera that we had obtained on loan. When Beth and Justin departed, we discreetly followed them from afar. Nikki examined receipts and credit card statements until we deciphered their routine. Beth was cautious, but in Justin's perspective, Nikki was overwhelmed and incapable of protection, so he was negligent and imprudent. Justin's parents owned a modest cabin by the sea, nestled among trees. It appeared slightly worn, yet based on the vehicle's odometer, it was their destination on Fridays when they skipped their workout completely. We parked off the road and stealthily approached the cabin with the camera. Without curtains, it was easy to spot them and observe. By the time we positioned ourselves, they were already undressed on the bed. Since we needed to walk back to our car, I deflated one of Justin's tires slightly to delay them in case they decided to leave sooner. We dropped the film at a photo lab known for its private processing of images and then returned home. Beth came back much later than usual, her attire and hair in disarray. Nikki, chuckling, informed me the next day that Justin had to change his outfit and then encountered a nail on the road, resulting in a tedious walk in the rain to a gas station 4 miles away. It seemed like karma. Over the following week we discussed our desires. Nikki caught me off guard with her proposal, but ultimately I consented. We stayed silent and then executed our significant plan about 3 weeks after gathering our proof. Beth and Justin typically vanished all day on Saturdays, but Nikki and I identified their usual sequence: gym first, then intimacy and showers, followed by dancing and partying at the nightclub. They generally got back around 6 or 7 a.m. on Sunday. However, this time was slightly different. After they left, we entrusted the children to Nikki's sister and set out. Our first stop was shopping, where Nikki selected a snug, dark emerald dress with a low-cut neckline and a short hemline which accentuated her hair color. I dressed in a dark grey suit paired with a black shirt. We went to a beauty salon where I encouraged them to give Nikki a complete makeover. After dressing up, we proceeded to the nightclub and entered with confidence. The doorman, though typically required to check us, allowed us entry without hesitation due to Nikki's stunning appearance, understanding that part of his role is to ensure an appealing crowd. We were the first on the dance floor, then moved to the main event. Justin and Beth were seated at a secluded table in the club, a spot they occupied every Saturday. After dancing to a few songs, we approached their table, Nikki grasping my hand. Beth was in a yellow dress I hadn't seen before, and Justin in a blue suit. Although I couldn't claim Nikki outshone Beth, Beth looked sun-kissed, and sophisticated Nikki exuded a glamorous, daring allure that attracted attention from all over the venue. I offered Nikki a seat and sat down myself. Beth and Justin were visibly astounded. I looked around, feigning surprise at the lavish setting, hinting that even some gyms lacked such elegance. Justin scowled at Nikki, critical of her dress purchase. I interjected sharply, clarifying that I had bought it. I then placed a pile of photos from the cabin on the table, selecting the most unflattering ones. While most photos I captured were more flattering, showcasing their attractiveness, these particular images portrayed them in an awkward and untidy light. I explained how I got back part of my deposit for a beachside bungalow in Mexico, intended as a surprise for Beth on our anniversary. Since that plan was cancelled, I chose to invest in something meaningful. Beth's expression shifted momentarily, possibly showing disappointment upon realizing there was more money available, as she reviewed the displayed photos. Justin eventually felt the presence of danger and was stunned. Beth became ashen. So how long have we been working together? Nearly 4 months. How did you figure everything out? I didn't really have to discover anything. You didn't bother to conceal it. You just presumed we would be too disheartened or too frail to act. Justin attempted to regain some composure and sneered derisively. So you two fell for each other, Nikki sneered. I can't stand him at all, he's a total jerk. And she's genuinely not to my liking. Nikki's menacing grin broadened. But the intimacy, oh my God, it's incredible. Nothing surpasses furious revenge intimacy, all the vile things you could think of. She looked at Beth with a lethal gaze, and plenty you wouldn't dare to. I'm certain that nothing but familial spite convinced her to explore all sorts of novel intimate acts. She sang the last words, casting a glance at Justin. Beth stepped back as if struck, looking at me. You can't be doing this. We attempted to collaborate effectively. That was utterly futile. I chuckled, but without any joy. You were just biding your time until this situation unfolded, and I was intimate with him 3 or 4 times a week, while I was looking after the kids and living abstemiously for months. People visited my office to deliver bad news. Not only did you betray me, but you also turned it into a public scandal. We didn't have to spy to catch you. Everything was openly visible. I could sense my fury escalating rapidly, but Nikki squeezed my leg. This time, Nikki took charge. Clearly, the divorces will be due to infidelity. It won't affect the financial outcome, but let's be honest. It's more equitable and will make us feel vindicated. My new pastime will be ensuring everyone receives copies of the photographs along with a detailed account of how you wrecked your marriages. Family, colleagues, bosses, heck, I'll even notify your first-grade Sunday school teacher. She paused, focusing on Justin. By the way, I'm moving in with my sister for now, with Jamie to clear my mind. What's more concerning for you is the fact that you both misappropriated funds from a construction company's building materials account. It took us a while to piece it together, but when Nikki noticed you two lavishing money like sailors on leave, we figured the funds had to originate from somewhere. Nikki and I have amassed more than sufficient evidence. There are tax complications, wire fraud, and even an instance of mail fraud. So even if Justin's cousin dismisses it, you're in significant trouble. You're likely facing 5 to 10 years behind bars, I pointed at Justin, and a few years in prison for being an accomplice. For you, Beth with her eyes wide, Beth instantly sought to defend herself. I had no idea. I assumed it was his money, so I deposited it into the account to safeguard it from the divorce. I interrupted her. Yes, you were saving it for a friend. Moreover, this aligns this money with our divorce. Had my name been on this account, I would have suspected you were framing me. This could have ended disastrously. Beth and Justin blanched. I surmised they had contemplated the idea, but ultimately rejected it. I presented a compromise that Nikki and I had previously formulated. You have one opportunity for a more promising future. Justin, take the chance. Leave your job and head for the mountains, at least 400 kilometers away. Take your vehicle, clothing, soccer trophies, and yearbook. Nothing else. Absolutely nothing. Nikki will file for divorce. But she won't acquire anything from it, considering your clandestine arrangement with your cousin. We won't report to the police or your cousin. If your cousin discovers this on his own and decides to act, it will be your issue. I would advise reallocating any remaining funds back into his company's account. This could influence whether he decides to search for you. I observed Beth. Ma, I'm initiating a divorce. I intend to have sole custody, no financial support required, and the divorce will be filed under infidelity. You either consent to this arrangement or face imprisonment, and I will assume complete custody. Regarding our belongings, compile a list of items you desire. Though it should be concise, you may retain your apparel and all your footwear. Nikki interjected. He proposed giving me your belongings, but the shoes don't fit, and the garments are unappealing. I've ceased wearing undergarments around him, so the old-fashioned underpants are yours. I grinned at Nikki, while Beth struggled to maintain her composure. Proceed to secure employment, relocate to your parents, or someone else's home. It's immaterial to me. You'll be allowed numerous visits with the children. I won't obstruct them. You're an adequate mother. I won't disclose the reason for our separation to your parents. I scrutinized their faces, ensuring their attention. You have until midnight tomorrow to decide. If Justin hasn't departed by then, his belongings will be transferred to his cousin and the authorities will be notified. This proposal is valid only if both of you agree. Nikki leaned in, flaunting her pronounced cleavage, likely for Beth's benefit. You both have managed a remarkable feat. We realized we had absolutely nothing in common. We couldn't settle on a film, detested each other's music, and if he discussed his hobbies, I'd lapse into unconsciousness. And she is an overly sensitive shrew, whose voice is aggravating as shattered glass. I added, while Nikki maintained eye contact with Justin with a predatory gaze. Our only common ground was physical intimacy. That was our sole activity. If we dined together, it was merely to replenish our energy for more intimacy. She addressed Beth. It's baffling that you left him for such a fool. I'm not jesting. Join us sometime. It might be more thrilling. I glanced at my watch, interrupting her. Apologies, we must depart to fetch the children. I stood, offering my hand to Nikki. Something in Nikki had shifted, possibly due to the confrontation with Justin and Beth. The sheer fury seemed to have vanished. She remained impassioned, but lacked the earlier intense insanity. Beth hurriedly approached me. We should have conversed months prior. Let's maintain distance from this troublemaker. I halted her with a gesture. The only troublemaker here is you. She looked at me, a mixture of shock and disdain in her gaze, a rare expression for her. You fail to grasp, Beth. In comparison to Justin, you're in a preferable situation. Nikki fought for you, persuading and pleading on your behalf, attempting to portray Justin as the antagonist. You cannot fathom her efforts. She despised you deeply yet persisted. She believes her chaotic situation influenced ours. Though I'm not entirely convinced, I consented because of her pleas. I paused, calming my rising irritation, then continued calmly. Had the money laundering been linked to me, or had the twins' DNA results been different, this conversation wouldn't be happening. Nikki's pleas would have been irrelevant. She realized, horrified by her isolation. How long do I have to vacate technically? Until tomorrow midnight, for the sake of symmetry. But you have a week. It will require 2 days to organize all these shoes, and heaven knows I wish they would vanish. She whispered something resembling an apology and proceeded upstairs. It took her 5 days to relocate, leaving me by myself with the children. Even with the twins, everything felt quite hollow. I've heard that Justin's cousin is on the lookout for him but refuses to contact the authorities. I'm hoping Justin is concealing himself effectively. His cousin has always been aggressive. I might have backtracked slightly on my pledge not to disclose anything to his cousin. 2 weeks later, I permitted the twins to spend the weekend with Beth and her folks. They were well aware of the rules, and Beth was also fully cognizant that the penalty for any mischief would be an immediate visit to jail. Close to midnight, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Nikki was there in heavy makeup and nightclub attire, looking unusually cheerful. At least someone was adjusting. So she departed. I nodded and went back to her parents, attempting to decipher the enigmatic copy of the divorce petition that had Chester's name scrawled on it in bright red lipstick. Thanks for sending Nikki, she beamed with her wild smile. Fantastic. I wanted to do something nice for her. Let's give them something to discuss, I chuckled. I had vowed not to inform Beth's parents, but Nikki had made no such promise. In fact, she had vowed the exact opposite. Hence, a series of packages were dispatched to Beth's friends and relatives with photographs. I doubt she'll ever fully recover from it. Nikki's grin grew even broader. Hey, I brought a housewarming present. I nearly corrected her. After all, I hadn't moved, but in some ways. She was correct. The house felt renewed. I think we can split a dessert. A familiar face with a light cap peeked out from behind her. I've brought cream puffs. Poor Amber. She was so inexperienced, and the two of us indulged in her as if she were candy. We enticed her into our whirlwind. She was more of an instigator in an escalating situation than a partner, not that she had any complaints. After all the antics Nikki and I had pulled on each other over the months, we managed to offer Amber an intensive course in delight. She fainted twice. Nikki grinned like a cat that had just enjoyed a feast. The following morning she assisted Amber, who could barely manage her wobbly legs, to her car. A few evenings later, Nikki arrived alone. A few days afterward, she showed up with Jamie. When the children had fallen asleep, she silently led me straight to the bedroom. This time, we proceeded more gently. Then, I lay there, gazing at the ceiling, with her head on my shoulder while her finger sketched a design on my chest. We can't continue like this, Nikki. I sensed her stiffen. I went on. We sort of concurred. I know we never explicitly stated it, but I think we agreed that we share nothing in common, no emotional connection, and I'm troubled by this silence. Then quietly jerk. Then I felt her familiar wild grin against my shoulder as her fingernail traced a heart over mine. You were probably clueless as a kid. Should they have called in an expert to teach you to walk, Beth might not have suffered enough, but choosing was Nikki's prerogative, and Nikki is intricate and perhaps unhinged, so understanding her decisions is challenging. Perhaps she thinks there's barely a chance for redemption, at least for some, or perhaps she desires Beth to witness what she has lost. Make no mistake, Beth forfeited everything she held dear. Nikki made absolutely certain of it, and I'm convinced Nikki wouldn't be as satisfied if Beth were imprisoned. Nikki wouldn't delight in the spectacle. Nikki will eventually have complete control over Beth's access to her own daughters. From that initial day when she appeared in the rain, this had probably been her scheme all along. Truthfully, I'm uncertain and prefer not to inquire. She can simply respond. Nikki has a permanent spot in my heart. She might not be as attractive as Beth, but that's irrelevant. She loves with intensity and totality and won't release until she falls to pieces. She has reintroduced Amber multiple times, but Amber poses no threat to our relationship. She is what Nikki wishes to share with the man she adores. As Nikki stated, Amber is essentially the dessert, an extra slice of cheesecake that you cannot finish alone but are delighted to share. Nikki is merely expressing her affection in a slightly unorthodox manner. Indeed, she's manipulative and erratic, possibly even hazardous, but that's her nature. Subscribe to our channel so that your partner doesn't deceive you, and go ahead and listen to the next tale because this story pales in comparison to the next one.